To understand a complete Orthodox tradition, we map its core components. Across Abrahamic lineages, we expect three interlocking pillars: sacred language, social law, and inner esotericism. In Judaism, these are explicit. Hebrew functions strictly as the sacred language, while Halakha organizes the social world. We see the exact same architecture in Islam. Arabic provides the sacred linguistic matrix, and Sharia constitutes the exoteric social legislation. But when plotting early Christianity onto this matrix, two pillars are missing. There is no native sacred language and no original social law. Christianity possesses no original sacred language of its own. To transmit its foundational texts, it officially relied entirely on Greek and Latin translations of Hebrew scriptures. René Guénon draws a sharp distinction here. A true sacred language is intrinsically linked to the metaphysical transmission of a tradition. The numerical and hieroglyphic values of its characters encode exact spiritual realities. Latin and Greek, by contrast, functioned merely as liturgical languages. They stabilized the public rituals and prevented the daily vernacular from corrupting the texts, but they were not constructed to encode divine revelation inherently. The tradition is equally silent on social legislation. Rather than constructing a comprehensive religious law from the ground up, the early church completely bypassed the issue by adopting the pre-existing civil laws of the Roman Empire. Christ's injunction to "render unto Caesar" explicitly accepts a foreign legislative authority. The tradition makes no attempt to govern the public, exoteric domain. Every tradition designed to organize a mass society must provide a public law to govern crowds and a native language to anchor their collective belief. By refusing to provide either, early Christianity signaled it had no intention of being a religion for the general population. In Guénon's analysis, this indicates it was founded exclusively as an esoteric tariqa, a hidden initiatory path for the qualified few. During the early centuries of the Church, the Greco-Roman world was in a state of terminal decay. Its ancient traditional forms had degenerated into pure superstition, and its social order was collapsing. If Christianity had maintained its original, closed structure as an elite initiatory order, the vast majority of the Western population would have been left without any traditional framework to anchor them. To prevent this total spiritual vacuum, the tradition executed what Guénon terms a providential descent. Christianity sacrificed its strictly esoteric purity in order to spread its influence across the collapsing Western world. The closed initiatory circle, similar to a Buddhist Sangha, was forced open. It expanded its boundaries outward to construct a universal, exoteric religion capable of absorbing the masses. This structural inversion was politically formalized in the 4th century with the conversion of Constantine and the doctrinal codifications at the Council of Nicaea. But an open religion cannot administer high-level esoteric rites to the general public. The rigorously guarded initiatory practices of the early church had to be systematically downgraded into universal sacraments designed only to guarantee basic salvation. We can trace this downgrade directly through the physical evolution of the church's central rites. The stone baptismal fonts found across medieval Europe represent the adaptation of what was once an elite gateway. Originally, baptism was a strict initiation into the lesser mysteries, requiring intense adult preparation, extreme secrecy, and the verification of deep spiritual qualifications before a candidate could achieve second birth. By transforming this rite into an automatic sacrament administered to infants who possess no capacity for esoteric qualification, the Church severed the rite from its initiatory origins. This providential descent succeeded in saving the West from complete traditional collapse. But by encasing the doctrine in rigid exoteric dogma, the Church successfully buried its own initiatory origins, leaving the deep esoteric core seemingly inaccessible. With the Church now functioning entirely in the exoteric public domain, a structural problem emerges. How did the Western world maintain its vital living link to the true spiritual center of the primordial tradition? In traditional terminology, this supreme metaphysical center is called the Holy Land or the Pardes. It is the ultimate source of spiritual authority, completely independent of any specific geographic location.
Geographic territories, like historical Palestine or the Temple Mount, are merely physical, localized reflections of this higher, hidden reality. Guénon identifies the Knights Templar not merely as crusaders fighting over physical territory, but as the active guardians of this supreme center. They functioned as the precise esoteric valve connecting the exoteric Western Church back to the primordial source. To bridge these worlds, the Templars required a highly specific dual nature, symbolized directly in their seal by two riders sharing a single mount. They wielded the temporal power of the warrior while maintaining the spiritual authority of the monk. This exact warrior initiation allowed the Templars to bypass exoteric religious boundaries entirely. Through it, they maintained direct, diplomatic, and esoteric communication with Islamic organizations in the East, groups who held the exact same title of guardians. When the French monarchy politically annihilated the Templar order in the 14th century, the consequences extended far beyond finance or geopolitics. The institutional structure linking Europe to the center of the world was severed. The Templars were the load-bearing pillar of Western esotericism. Their sudden removal destabilized the spiritual architecture of Europe, triggering the unprecedented deviations that would eventually fracture the Western world. With the destruction of the Templars, the surviving initiatory currents were forced entirely underground to avoid profane destruction. The custodianship of this knowledge passed directly to figures like Dante Alighieri. Dante was at the center of a covert network known as the Fidèle d'Amour. This organization maintained the exact spirit and metaphysical science of the Templar order by burying it inside highly encrypted literature. Modern academic historians routinely miscategorize these poets, either as practicing a vague, emotional religious mysticism or as anti-Catholic heretics attempting to subvert the Church. Both conclusions are false. True esotericism is an active, rigorous intellectual realization of metaphysical truth. It is entirely distinct from mysticism, which relies on passive, emotional experiences and strictly remains within the confines of exoteric religion. Because this specific initiatory path was designed for the active, chivalric nature of the warrior class, it utilized the affective vocabulary of romance to disguise its technical instruction. When we apply the metaphysical definitions found in Guénon's research, the word amore, or love, sheds its sentimental meaning. It describes the transcendent intellect and the attainment of immortality. The idealized woman, the Madonna, is not a historical figure. She represents divine wisdom, the transcendent feminine principle, known in Eastern traditions as the Shakti, and the persistent references to mort, or death, are not expressions of melancholy. They describe the uninitiated, profane state of ordinary humanity living outside the spiritual center. By reading these texts literally, modern critics confuse a highly technical, coded blueprint for spiritual transcendence with mere romantic rhyming. In doing so, they remain entirely blind to the underground survival of Western initiation. Cut off from direct transmission and isolated over the centuries, these underground initiatory currents eventually fractured. Without rigorous guidance, the technical science of the Fidèle d'Amour dissolved into the very emotional mysticism it had once sought to transcend. This leaves us with a stark topographical map of Western spirituality today. The outer rings of the structure remain entirely intact, but the inner nodes linking back to the origin have faded away. The modern West possesses a massive, functionally valid exoteric shell. Its rites remain capable of granting the basic salvation they were designed for, but the inner core, the path to direct, transcendent realization, is empty. Guénon establishes a critical axiom here. True esotericism never opposes the exoteric religion that houses it. It simply superimposes upon it, drawing deeper truths from the exact same symbols and rites. The tragedy is that while the Catholic Church preserved the rites, it lost the intellectual framework needed to access the profound metaphysical meanings hidden within them. Europe has reached a state where religious faith might remain, that the ability to read the secret language of its own tradition is gone. The supreme center is no longer a destination, it is a forgotten memory.